Vento, presented by Ms. Boone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think so. Thank you. Good evening. The McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act is federal legislation that ensures educational protections for students who are experiencing homelessness. I'm having a little technology problem.
All right?
Okay, thank you. When we think about who's considered homeless for educational purposes, it's a much broader definition. The core of the definition says anyone who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This federal legislation also gives you examples of living situations that would be considered homeless, like sharing the housing due to a loss of housing, economic hardship, or similar reason. We also consider families, children who may be living in hotels, motels, trailer parks, camping grounds, all of this because there's a lack of alternative housing. Families, children who may be in emergency or transitional shelters, children who may be abandoned in hospitals, children who may be living in public or private places that are not designed for humans to live, such as cars, parks, bus or train stations. In some cities, you see where families may have erected tent cities. Sometimes you even hear of families or homeless folks who may be living under park benches. Families, children who may be living in abandoned buildings, substandard housing. And when we consider a family or student who may be living in substandard housing, we actually would be looking at families, students who may be living in homes that may not have running water, utilities. It may be overcome with rodents, that kind of thing. A migratory student would only be considered homeless if they were living in any of the circumstances that we just described. There's also a subset of children who have been identified by this federal legislation, and it's unaccompanied youth. And McKinney-Vento describes an unaccompanied youth as a youth who is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. And there may be lots of reasons why this is the case. You sometimes hear these children referred to as throwaways or runaways. Maybe there was a situation where the student did not want to go along with the family rules, and maybe the parent kicked them out of the house or they ran away. You hear of children, students who may be couch surfing, who may be living from here to there, girlfriends, boyfriends, that kind of thing. The key thing to keep in mind is that these are students who are not with a parent or guardian, and they have the same educational protections as a student who is with a parent or guardian. Okay, one of the main things to think about or to keep in mind when you think about this federal legislation is that the whole intent is to ensure that these students have educational rights and protections. They have the right to immediately enroll in school, even if they don't have normally required documents. And it's not that they can just choose arbitrarily what school they want to enroll in. It's a choice of two schools. Either the local school, which would be the school that students who are living in the attendance zone where they are living would attend, or either the school of origin. And the school of origin is defined as the school that the student attended last when they were permanently housed. Again, these students must be immediately enrolled, and even if they don't have normally required documents, like birth certificates, immunization records, proof of residence, we must immediately enroll them and then work with the schools to get those documentation. Another right is the right to receive transportation. So we must provide transportation for the students to and from school. We also must make sure that they receive services that are comparable to non-homeless students. I wanted to just share a few highlights with you from last school year. When we look at our data from last school year, we identified 692 school-age students and then an additional 93 students or children who were birthed to 2 years old and 3 to 5 year olds. We are required by federal law or through the State Department to not only serve or identify school-age students, but we must also work with families who have younger children. The total number of students that we identified last school year was 785. And when you look at that grand total, that averaged 22 new students a week that we were identifying. We also provided after-school tutoring at area shelters to include Homeless No More, Palmetto Place, and Sister Care. Another big initiative that we launched 2 years ago, which was in partnership with the NAACP, was to provide housing clinics across the district. We scheduled those clinics at various schools across the district, and for the most part, we targeted all of the clusters. Last school year, we had a total of 9 clinics, and we had approximately 400 families that we served. This was an opportunity for our families to receive assistance in a one-stop shop setting where they were able to get direct support services from organizations such as Cooperative Ministry, Wateree Community Actions, South Carolina Legal Services, USC Law, Columbia Housing. So they were able to get their immediate needs addressed in a one-stop shop. This school year, we will continue this initiative, and South Carolina Legal Services will be our partner. This graph sort of gives you an overview of where our students were last school year. You can see the 93 that were birthed to 2, 3 to 5 year olds. And then when we look at elementary, middle, and high school, you see a breakdown by the levels. Any questions?
Any questions at this time? Okay, Commissioner Harris.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Ms. Boone, for this presentation. We are in school now, our 3rd week. Where is our numbers as of right now?
As of Friday, we have a total of 211.
Okay. So we're already at 211 kids in 3 weeks. So instead of 22 kids a week, that number is grown tremendously.
It has. But, I mean, we continue to identify students each week, but it levels out when you look over the whole year.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, any other questions? Okay, Commissioner Myers.
So can you give me an outline, how can that transportation work? So if a student was zoned for Columbia High and emergency happened and they have to move to, let's say Sumter, we have to provide transportation Monday through Friday to and from for that student?
When you look at determining, I guess, what's in the best interest of the child, you really have to sort of drill down, ask questions, look at the situation. Now, if that was a senior, you know, who needed to stay at Columbia High, If they transfer to a school in Sumter, who is on a whole different schedule, where it wouldn't line up, it would prevent that child from graduating on time, then yes, that would definitely be something that we would need to consider. But everything that we do in terms of providing transportation and services is based on what's in the best interest of that child. So of course you do that in concert or conversation with the parent or guardian, as well as talk to school, talk to the student, and sort of get a sense of what makes sense.
All right?
Thank you for that. And my second part, so for instance, it's a family of 4, let's say 2 in elementary, 1 in middle, 1 in high. We have to provide transportation for each one of those schools. So we stopping by the elementary school as well as middle, as well as high. Will they all be on the same transportation?
You mean in the same vehicle?
Yes.
It really just depends, because oftentimes with the start of school days in Richland 1, it's not the case. Everybody's not piled into one cab. So it really just depends, and the transportation vendors that we use, they pretty much determine that. Now, if there's an issue or concern where maybe the parent says, I would like for my student to ride with the older sibling, we just sort of have to make sure that makes sense, because, at some schools you can't get to school before a certain time. So it's a matter of trying to juggle all of that.
Thank you. I was just trying to get clarity if the elementary was getting out at 2:30, was they sitting in the taxi cab until the middle school getting out?
Oh, no, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for that information. No other question.
All right, with no other questions, we'll now, okay, Commissioner Devine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Boone. How long are we obligated to provide the service to the student?
Well, once a student has been identified as protected by McKinney Vento, they're protected for the duration of that school year. So even if that student becomes permanently housed in that year, if it's not in the attendance zone for that school and transportation is needed, we have to provide transportation.
All right. And typically, your funding is federal dollars, is that correct?
Yes.
Typically, what's that dollar amount, roughly?
Well, as you all know, just like we got ESSER funds, McKinney Vento got American Rescue Plan monies, HCY. So that money now has to be liquidated by the end of September, and we have to have it all, everything wrapped up by the end of the year.
Right.
So with that monies, we got close to $500,000. But typically, we're funded through a competitive grant.
Right.
We're in year 3 of a 3-year grant. We're writing now for a new grant. But the monies, I think the 3-year grant that we just are wrapping up is like 90,000, 90+ thousand.
And the remainder of your money comes from local?
The remainder of the money really comes through general funds
Right.
in terms of providing transportation.
All right. Then last question, Mr. Chairman. Not to compare, but do you know how we compare with surrounding districts as it pertains to McKinney Vento number of students served?
Oh, we're up in the high numbers. I mean, when we look at our counterparts like Richland 2 and even Charleston County, which is a much larger district, our numbers are higher than they are, because I'm in contact with the coordinator there quite often.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Boone.
Commissioner Clyburn.
Okay. Thank you so much. And just to follow up on the last question that Commissioner Devine had about the numbers, considering surrounding districts and comparing those, us to other districts, but our poverty levels are, can be much higher than some of those other districts, and that affects those numbers as well, correct?
Well, I mean, poverty definitely affects or impacts homelessness. And so when we look at the families that we work with and serve, it's not that they don't work, they don't make a living wage. So definitely we're talking about families who are impacted by poverty.
Okay, thank you so much. And then the question that I had is dealing with partnerships. You mentioned some organizations that we work with, such as Homeless No More and Watery Community Actions and some of the others. Are there any partnerships that could alleviate or help bring a child and a family out of homelessness that you could name?
I guess when I think about what you just asked, to me, the issue or the concern is not only a local or state problem, it's a national problem. There's a lack of affordable housing. Just like I talked to a parent today who works. She's living doubled up with a family member. But when she's trying to rent property, they require you to make 2 and 3 times the rent. She doesn't make that kind of money. So that's really the issue, why there's so much homelessness, because there is a lack of affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, Commissioner Devine again.
Thank you. One more, and just to add to that, being a housing person myself in Columbia, Richland County, there's a shortage of about 13,000 to 16,000 affordable housing units. So that's a number that we need to keep in mind as we go along with this program. Lastly, something that I thought about, because we've done this over the last several years, for many, many years, the type of support that you provided when we've had floods, when we've had families move from apartment complexes, nothing due to their own, or families just had to move for whatever reason. What type of support do our students get, example, for in aftercare? Do they receive scholarships for aftercare, those type things?
Well, the beauty is, nice that you mentioned that. The beauty, we have a very good partnership with Extended Day. So any of our students who are in need of or who would like to participate in after school can get scholarships to attend. And so we do regularly refer families to that office. Also, some of our shelters provide after schools, so they're able to participate in those programs as well.
Very good. All right. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Myers.
Last question. Test scores in attendance with those students. Do we have any updates on how the attendance look with them and test scores? Is it passing or does it affect the test scores? Just curiosity.
Well, attendance is something, of course, that we definitely look at, and we work closely with AARE to sort of monitor and track that data. I don't have that before me today, but I can get you some information about that.
Thank you so much, and I definitely appreciate this information this afternoon.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, thank you so much for that discussion. Thank you for your presentation. We'll now go to item 8.01, which is public